Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People Story. When I inherited my family's farm after my dad passed away, it was a dream come true. I had always loved helping out around the place as a kid, feeding the animals and exploring the sprawling acres of land. Now in my 30s, I was excited to settle down and make this farm my own. The first few years went smoothly. I hired some local help to assist with the day-to-day chores, and spent my time planning improvements to increase efficiency and make the farm more profitable. My closest neighbor, Jim, was supportive and helped me get adjusted to running a farm on my own. That all changed when Jim moved away and sold his property to a young couple from the city named Chad and Stacy. I tried to welcome them to the area, even bringing over a homemade pie, but they made it clear they weren't interested in mingling with a simple farmer. I brushed off their rude behavior, assuming they just needed time to settle in. But soon it became apparent they saw my farm as an inconvenience that disrupted their plans. The complaints started pouring in. The rooster's morning crowing, the smell from the pig pen, even the sound of my tractor tilling the fields. No matter how hard I tried to accommodate them, it was never enough. I started dreading coming home each day, wondering what new outrageous demand would be waiting for me. One morning I woke up to a shocking discovery. Chad and Stacy had started constructing a large in-ground swimming pool on my property. Without even asking permission or talking to me about it, they just decided to annex part of my land for their own personal use. I was furious but didn't want to escalate the situation without trying to reason with them first. I marched over to their house and rang the doorbell. Chad answered with an annoyed look on his face. "What do you want?" he asked rudely. I pointed toward the half-finished pool foundation poured on my east field. "Would you mind explaining that?" I asked. Chad laughed. "Oh, that. Don't worry about it. We're just building a pool for our own use. No need to throw a fit." "A fit?" I said incredulously. "You're building on my property without my permission. That's trespassing." Chad dismissed my concerns with a wave of his hand. "Tomato, tomato. We need a pool and this spot has the best sunlight. Don't be so selfish." I took a deep breath, trying to restrain my anger. "I'm going to give you one opportunity to dismantle what you've built and return my field to its original state," I said as calmly as I could manage. This must have amused Chad as he burst out laughing directly in my face. "Yeah, that's not going to happen," he scoffed. "We have a contract with the pool company, so you're wasting your breath. Maybe you should build your own pool if you're so jealous. Now, if you'll excuse me." He slammed the door rudely. My patience had officially run out. I immediately called my lawyer to discuss my options. She suggested sending Chad and Stacy written notice that they were encroaching on my property illegally. If they didn't halt construction within 7 days, I could pursue legal action. The next week dragged by as I watched in fury as the pool took shape on my land each day. I knew Chad and Stacy had received my letter, but clearly they didn't take my threat seriously. On the 8th day, I'd had enough. I rented an excavator and went to work dismantling their unfinished pool. Chad and Stacy came running out of their house, screaming at me to stop. Chad even got in the excavator's path, trying to block me. "What the hell are you doing?" Chad yelled. "You're destroying our pool." "Correction, I'm removing a structure you illegally built on my property after I gave you fair warning," I replied, continuing to dig up the pool. Chad's face turned beet red. "You'll pay for this. We're calling the police," he shouted. "Go right ahead," I shrugged, undeterred. "Just tell them to bring a property survey map." 20 minutes later, the police arrived. Chad and Stacy angrily told them I was destroying their pool and demanded I be arrested. But once I showed the officers the correspondence I had sent them, and the survey map clearly marking the property line, they understood the full story. "You'll have to take this up in civil court if you want to be compensated for the costs," the officer told Chad bluntly. "But this man is clearly within his rights to remove structures built on his own land without permission." Chad sputtered in protest, but realized he was licked. The officers actually gave me kudos for my restraint, saying many people in my position would have done more than return the land to its original state. As the excavator finished demolishing the pool, I watched with satisfaction, relieved to have my field back in its rightful condition. Chad and Stacy glared daggers at me, but knew better than to cause any more trouble. In the end, they didn't even bother taking me to court. I guess they knew deep down that they didn't have a legal leg to stand on. The whole ordeal only proved I had been right in my first impression of them, but at least now when I look out my window, instead of seeing their half-built pool on my land, all I see is open fields and peacefulness. And that's just the way I like it. The next one is a pro-revenge story. Last summer I bought a house trailer and decided to rent it out. It needed some work, so I offered 2 months of free rent in exchange for putting carpet in the living room, hooking up the hot water heater, and installing a toilet. I found a nice couple with a newborn who were willing to do the work. Everything was agreed upon verbally, with no lease, just a month-to-month arrangement. There was no security deposit, and the monthly rent was set at $450. They completed the work, and in return I didn't ask for rent for the first 2 months. Everything seemed fine. As a side note, there are a few state laws that come into play. If you fail to pay rent for 3 consecutive months, you are considered a squatter, which means the landlord isn't obligated to maintain the property and can even padlock it, denying you entry. If you're on house arrest and get formally evicted, you could face violations. Additionally, you can be formally evicted even if you've already moved out, allowing the landlord to collect the rent owed. Despite eviction bans, cases initiated before the ban may still proceed, and certain conditions can warrant eviction. Ultimately, the judge's discretion plays a significant role. Fast forward 5 months and there was still no rent payment. Although they had a newborn and were financially struggling, the husband managed to spend $1,500 on a new engine for his project car, dine out, and invest in electronics, all while neglecting the rent. After that 3rd month of non-payment, I took no action. The weather was getting colder and I didn't install the promised furnace. If it weren't for their newborn, I would have padlocked the house. They mentioned their tax refund, and I gave them an opportunity to catch up, but they asserted their knowledge of their rights and claimed to be on a rent strike, which was illegal, as you'll see later. When COVID-19 hit, the husband lost his job, so I gave them some leeway. However, when he returned to work, I asked for the back rent once more and was met with a rude response. I had finally had enough, so I informed them that they had 14 days to vacate the property or I would initiate a formal eviction. Given the husband's house arrest, he understood the consequences. I genuinely wanted to spare him from returning to jail and prevent an eviction from tarnishing their record. I was attempting to be understanding and civil. They eventually left, and I accepted my losses. However, when I inspected the property, I discovered that they had removed everything they had installed during their stay. Everything they had received free rent for was gone. This infuriated me, and I decided to file for a formal eviction. Their plan didn't go as expected. They claimed I hadn't provided heat, so they had gone on a rent strike. However, they hadn't filed this with the courts or set aside the money. They simply believed they could stop paying rent. The value of what they had invested in the trailer was less than the rent they owed. The judge sided with me, agreeing that they owed the 2 months' rent they had received for the work they had completed. Furthermore, the judge awarded me $2,000 in damages because of the damage they caused while removing their belongings. During the proceedings, the husband began attacking my character, so I responded with, "Well, you didn't inform me that you were going to be placed on house arrest when you rented the property." Up to that point, the judge had appeared uninterested, but now he was attentive. He asked them if that statement was true, and they confirmed it, leading the judge to make his ruling. I received 15 months' worth of back rent at $450 per month and $2,000 in damages due to the damages they caused while removing their property. As for the husband, the judge had no choice but to inform his parole officer about the eviction. Fast forward to this month, and the husband's house arrest was violated, resulting in his arrest. Astonishingly, they had the audacity to ask me to speak on his behalf. I chose not to do so. Consequently, the ruling was that the remaining 6 months of his sentence would be served in jail. They had a negative eviction on their record and they still owed me money. Know the law before you engage in any legal actions. The next one is a petty revenge story. So I worked at a popular department store out of college for a bit, and I have to say people are jerks. The number of people that asked me, "Oh, didn't you go to college? Oh, this is what you did with your degree?" makes my skin crawl. Everyone assumes you're dumb. And frankly, my will to carry out my duties to the fullest was non-existent considering how crappy management was. During one day when I started at 6 a.m. at job 1, only to head off to job 2, scene of the crime, an hour after my shift ended. Needless to say, I was tired around 4 p.m. My store had a coupon policy. If you scan a coupon, it gave you a pop-up you could accept or deny. I accepted all of them because I didn't care. Got an extreme couponer once. No less than 80 air fresheners, a few diapers, and maybe a handful of other items. But it was the air fresheners she had the deal for. After taking forever to scan, maybe 20 minutes, it was now time for the coupons. First coupon pop-up appears, and before I get the chance to click accept, she went off on me about how I was an idiot who couldn't read because clearly her coupons were legit. I tried to explain it's just the system. I did not personally telepathically communicate with the cash register to draw attention with the coupon. She was not having the explanation and dared that I question her coupons. It was all right there. I was just like, ma'am, it's all good, the coupon's fine. She says, of course it is. What, are you stupid? Well, I insisted on reading every single coupon she had in its entirety because screw her. She kept insisting they were identical, but I said I didn't want to make a stupid mistake. There was a lot of fine print too, but I read it all because why not? When she told me, this is taking forever, I insisted that all was good. My shift was not over for a few hours, so it was no trouble for me at all. She demanded she talk to the manager, and I did flip my light on, versus calling her for her attention. And I'm just like, damn crazy, she's busy right now. Guess we just have to continue. Around 30 minutes later, my manager did notice the light was on and rushed over to see the fuming woman. The manager apologized to her, but by that point the woman just said she was done, give her back her coupons. She could afford the rest, and she was never coming back again. The manager was upset I didn't call because flipping the light on doesn't really grab attention, but took it as an honest mistake since I just started. The best part is, as far as I could see, I never did see her in the store again. The next one is a malicious compliance story. So I started work in the 90s on the shop floor of a pipe-making factory, but made a few friends in the office. So, one year at our end-of-year breakup party, I overheard a story from the corporate lawyer who was retiring on the same day. Someone asked what his most memorable case was. This guy was gray. Gray hair, gray skin, gray clothing, gray manners. Nothing distinctive about him at all. In fact, at the annual company party known for drinking, this guy was always sober, but not that night. He was a contracts lawyer, never tried a case, just proofed contracts all day, as far as I know. He's probably dead by now, along with most people in this story. But no company names, as those entities live forever. So we made pipes. Plastic pipes, water supply, sewer, electrical, and telecommunications duct. We were the second biggest in the market and would swap contracts with the biggest manufacturer as we both bid on supplying the big players in the markets. In our jurisdiction, we had a government communication department that got sold off and became big telco along with deregulation of the sector. We supplied green ducting for telecommunications to big telco, lost the contract to the competition, gained it back, etc. Life went on. One day a new international company entered our market and started undercutting big telco. Let's call them OK Telco. So as things go, we lost the big telco contract, but picked up the OK Telco contract, which was bigger as they had to establish an entire network from scratch. Yay us. This is where Mr. Gray enters the story. He was a contracts lawyer, not a criminal law or other specialty, but contract law. He gets a please attend meeting invite from big telco, along with a select few from our company, probably about the upcoming renegotiating of contracts. When Mr. Gray walks into the room with his boss, there, sitting across the boardroom table, are Mr. Big Crap and several $5 a word flesh-eating attack lawyers. They ambush them with an injunction about using this green, the standard telecommunications green, for OK Telco pipes, and are ready to take them for everything, including the pension fund, for daring to supply the competition. They had a strict contract on the table which had to be signed then and there or another $5. A word flesh-eating attack lawyer standing by at the courthouse would have a judge sign an injunction against making any pipes at all until the case was settled. Probably an empty threat, but even a 2-week break in production could kill our company while lawyers cleared it with a judge to let us make other types of pipes. Mr. Gray looked over the contract and told the boss to sign as they could tie us up in knots due to their huge size and budget, while the contract just made it clear that this green was the exclusive property of Big Telco and could only be made for Big Telco. We folded like a shirt and signed. Life went on with us making OK Telco at that green pipe. A few months later, Mr. Gray went to a 20-year reunion from his law school. Guess who was there? Mr. Big Crap, telling everyone about how great a lawyer he is and how he can push around anyone due to how great he is, and definitely not due to his huge budget and army of $5. A word flesh-eating attack lawyers. Mr. Gray is pissed. Mr. Gray bides his time and pores over the contract. A few years later, Big Telco has to have a name change due to how much bad press they have from shifty service and practices, and as a way to avoid debts under the old name. They change everything, storefronts, letterheads, everything. They are now New Old Telco, contracts come and go. The other big pipe company gets the contract from New Old Telco to make pipes. Mr. Gray strikes. The other pipe company and New Old Telco get served with cease and desist orders about making and using green pipes. Big Crap's lawyer is puzzled and angry that this has happened and calls Mr. Gray. Mr. Gray arranges a meeting and then hangs up on Big Crap mid-threat. Big Crap turns up with his $5, a word flesh-eating attack lawyers to see just Mr. Gray in the boardroom, no ambush, no backup, just him. Mr. Gray lets him vent his spleen about how they're going to gut the company, and Mr. Gray will never work in law again. Then Mr. Gray takes out a packet of papers and a highlighter, makes a few strokes and pushes it to the closest $5, a word flesh-eating attack lawyer. They read what he had highlighted and screw up their face. This was repeated as the papers were passed to the Big Crap lawyer. I'm no lawyer, and this was about 30 years ago, so I can only paraphrase what Mr. Gray said he had highlighted. Only our pipe co., in conjunction with Big Telco, can make and use this green pipe, exclusively with no substitutes, parent or child companies, successors, or blah blah blah. Since there were only 2 companies listed on the contract, they were the only 2 sets of people who could decide the fate of this green pipe. Big Crap said that they could claim ownership of the pipe color, since they were in effect just a rebranded Big Telco. Mr. Gray pointed out that that admission would cause all their avoided debts to come home with interest, along with an admission of guilt in trying to pervert the course of justice. Big Crap then claimed that they inherited the ownership. Mr. Gray cut him off with the No Child Company clause. Big Crap went on for a while being blocked by Mr. Gray at every turn, and at the end, even his $5, a word flesh-eating attack lawyers were jumping in to shut him down because he was exposing them to risks greater than any of them were willing to be a part of, especially since they had made the contract as airtight as they could to screw us. As they were leaving, Mr. Gray said 2 things. This was an unfair fight, all of you versus me. Next time bring more and smarter lawyers. And since we now effectively control the this green, here's a document making the color public domain. We don't want to screw the other pipe company. It's not their fault they have idiots for customers. The next one is an entitled people story. At the time, several years ago, I lived on a corner lot. There was a neighbor who lived behind me with his driveway facing the other street. He worked in construction, and for the most part he was friendly but distant. Generally, there were no real problems. He did his thing and I did mine, but we didn't really talk much. He had a kid, though, who didn't live there but was over quite frequently. This kid owned a pit bull, but even though it was his dog, the dog lived at the neighbor's house because he had to move around a lot. It was mildly annoying because it would frequently get out and run around my yard, but we could just call the neighbor and let him know, and he'd come get it. The kid liked to park in my yard along the street, not in his dad's driveway, not along the street in front of his dad's house, but well over the property line on my lawn in the back corner. He also liked to pull out hard in his excessively heavy for personal driving truck, I think it was a 350, not only wore a huge bare spot on my lawn, but 6 inches deep ruts in my lawn along the street, because when he pulled out, he would frequently drive with one side of tires on my lawn for 50 before pulling completely out into the street. After heavy rains, his tires would cause a ton of damage. If he had parked there only occasionally, I wouldn't have cared. But he was there at least once a week, frequently more, and caused some very visible damage to my yard, so I noticed, and it bugged me to the point that every time he parked there, my attention was grabbed. I don't think he was being malicious, just entirely not thinking or caring about anybody else, figuring that my yard was fair game for parking and it was only grass, so why should he care? I gently brought it up to the neighbor and told him his son's parking on my lawn bothered me. He said he'd talk to him about it. I asked if he could bring in a yard of gravel to fill in the depression where the kid always parked his truck, so I wouldn't have a muddy puddle of ugly dirt there. I figured it was just a dumb kid who would at least forget from time to time, so as long as I didn't have the hole, I could live with it. I also asked for some fill dirt to fix the long rut. The neighbor worked in construction and said he had access to these materials, but he just never got around to it. Then one day a detective from Fugitive Recovery at the sheriff's department came knocking on the door. Turns out the kid was wanted for a parole violation and had been avoiding capture for a couple of years. The kid, in his early to mid-20s, was on the sex offender registry for criminal sexual contact with a minor. Whatever he had done was enough for them to be looking for him, but not a full-blown manhunt. Apparently, they hadn't been able to track him down, so they were knocking on all of the doors around his dad's house, asking everybody if they had seen him. All I could do was tell what I knew. A guy the neighbor called his kid, but I didn't know his name, was coming to the house frequently, was driving a very large and shiny newer model truck with a couple of distinctive features, and he always parked in a specific spot. Just look for the mud and the ruts. The detective gave me his card and asked me to call if I ever saw the truck again, but after that visit, I never saw it come back. Eventually, I looked up the name the detective had provided, and that person was no longer on the fugitive list, and the sex offender registry indicated that his place of residence was prison. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.